Good morning, all, and thank you for joining us for Increasing Consumer Awareness for Electric Vehicles, brought to you by Electrify America. My name is Simbiat Yusuf. I am the Communications Associate with Ford, and I will be moderating this webinar this morning. Attendees, please be sure to submit all your questions via the attendee chat. We will get through all of them after the presentations, at the end of the presentations. We will also be sharing the webinar slides and recording shortly after the webinar this morning. And with that, for some of the new folks today, I would like to start with a short and brief overview of Fourth and who we are. Fourth is a nonprofit trade association advocating for electric, shared, and smart transportation. We are focused in four main areas: industry development, demonstration projects, advocacy, and consumer engagement. We are working to advance the industry. You can find more information about Fourth, our projects, and our events and membership at fourthmobility.org. And this June, the Fourth Roadmap Conference will be held in conjunction with the International Electric Vehicle Symposium and Exposition. As the local host of the EVS 33, please show your support for the Fourth by registering using our code EVS 33 Fourth, which is at the bottom of the screen. Our speaker today are Fourth Program Manager Sergio López, Lea Malloy, Associate Vice President of Emerging Technology at Cox Automotive Mobility Group, and Kenneth Kurani, researcher at the UC-Davis Institute of Transportation Studies. Lea leads Cox Automotive Mobility Group's efforts on emerging tech with an emphasis on electric vehicle battery, powertrain, and charging services, as well as sensor and calibration capacities for fleet and retail clients. Previously, she oversaw reconditioning operations for Mannheim. Malloy joined Cox Automotive in 2010 in a strategy and corporate development role at Autotraders.com. She has held positions in product and portfolio management at AutoTrader before joining Cox Automotive Strategy in 2015. Malloy holds Bachelor of Arts degrees in psychology and sociology and a master's degree in business administration from Wake Forest University. Sergio leads the delivery of pilot projects that advance sustainable and socially equitable transportation. He also manages the Go Forth Electric Showcase in downtown Portland. He previously worked at Biketown as a customer relations specialist and brand ambassador, and as an assistant researcher at the Portland State University, helping develop green spaces. Sergio was born in Southern California and spent his childhood summers in Mexico, where both of his parents are from. Growing up in a low-income household, Sergio is passionate about the work Ford delivers. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Cultural Anthropology from Portland State University. Ken is a researcher at the UC-Davis Institute of Transportation Studies. His research interest includes household response to alternative fuel and electric drive vehicles, climate, energy, and the environment in household travel choices, and behavioral theory in transportation and energy. Here's a brief outline of our presentations today. We'll be focusing on consumer behavior research, consumer awareness research, Electrify America's New Normal campaign, and successes and challenges of current campaigns. And as a reminder, please submit your questions through the attendee chat, and we will get through them at the end of the presentation today. And with that, I'll pass it on to our first speaker of this morning, Ken. Ken will present on 5 years of research data on consumer considerations of electric vehicles.
Great, thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much to all of you for attending this morning. I'm going to cover a sequence of studies of households, primarily in California, over the period from 2014 to 2019, assessing whether there have been changes in consumer engagement and consideration of electric vehicles. If there's a punchline to this talk today, it is that there is clearly an ongoing need to continue to devote increasing resources to improving consumer awareness of electric vehicles. With that, I'll give a quick overview of, sorry, one too many. There we go. A brief summary of the data sources, as I said, be a series of studies from 2014, 17, and 19. All of the samples I'll talk about today are of households from California. All of the samples are of car-owning households. One of them is in particular a sample of new car buyers. The difference in the 2019 surveys, not only is the sample size more than twice that of the earlier studies, but we did that so that we could stratify the sample by air quality districts in California and start to say more focused things about regional differences within the state. And I'll touch on some of those briefly today. What I'm going to do primarily in this talk is I'm going to present research on sort of the context of market development, so things like the numbers of makes and models that have been offered for sale, the number of charging, the amount of charging infrastructure that's been deployed. And for each of those, I'll present a bit of data from our consumer research studies as to what effect, if any, that has had on consumer awareness and engagement with electric vehicles. So let's start with data on the makes and models of PHEVs and BEVs that have been offered over time. The timing of these counts are so that they are coordinated with the timing of each of the surveys, although that first count is just an early count from the middle of 2011, where there were 5 total BEVs and PHEVs for offer. And the point of this slide, of course, is that from 2011 to 2019, we have an order of magnitude increase in the cumulative number of makes and models. So what I mean by cumulative is if a car such as the Honda Fit EV came and went already, I'm still counting the Fit EV as a name that a consumer may have heard and might recall if we ask them, can you name a plug-in electric vehicle that's been offered for sale in the US, which we've done at each of these 3 surveys, and we'll go to that data next, which on my end doesn't seem to be, there we go. So, can you name a battery electric vehicle sold in the US? There's been very little change in the ability of these samples to name a vehicle, despite the increase in the number of possible correct names and the simple passage of time in which we've been ostensibly marketing these vehicles. The dark orange at the bottom is the people simply say, no, I can't name one. The paler orange is the people say, yes, I can, but the name they give is entirely wrong. And then the shades of blue are various ways that which people could be right. We count any answer that contains the word Tesla as a correct answer for a BEV. We have yes that are the Nissan Leaf, the Chevrolet Bolt. The Bolt has an asterisk because only in 2019 did I call it out separately from just being part of the right but other. And what we see is that over this time period, there's been really no change in the percentage of the population that can correctly name an electric vehicle. There's been some slight shift of the people who can towards Tesla. And if you're not Tesla, and if you're not Nissan, and even if you're Chevrolet, you really can't be too excited about the name recall for your product. But there's really just 2 cars, maybe 3 in 2019, that even a small number of people can recall. And let's face it, it's Tesla. Let's go on to some data on charging. So these are counts of charging stations in blue. Again, timed with more or less with our surveys. And then for 2017 and 19, I started to include the additional data on how many chargers were at these stations. So a station is just a location where there are chargers, and then whether those were level 2 or DC fast. And again, what we see is a pretty robust growth in the numbers of different places where there are chargers and in the numbers of chargers at those locations. The question then, of course, is the population of car buyers in general more likely to recall that they've seen charging for electric vehicles? And the answer again is by and large no. So if we ask people to agree or disagree with this statement, there are enough places to charge battery electric vehicles. -3 is strongly disagree, +3 is strongly agree. For each of the 3 samples, the mean values are not statistically significantly different, and they're all very slightly disagree, so -0.61 to -0.68. Those numbers, like as I said, are not statistically significantly different. What has changed, what did change from 2014 to 2017, is if you look at that very far left-hand edge there for the -3, the percentage of people who strongly disagree there are enough doubled. In effect, people sorted themselves in that disagree range. People sort of sorted themselves to either I strongly disagree or I don't know, with very little change in the distribution above 0, or the distribution of people who have some level of agreement with the statement that there is enough. So we built a lot more charging, but we did not get any, on average, we did not get any improvement in the percentage of people who agree that there's enough. We may, in fact, have convinced some people that there isn't enough. Looking at spending on incentives, so the data will, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. This is one of those places where I was going to show you the differences by region within California. So this is for 2019 only. And so that statewide average for California for 2019 was -0.67. The question is, hidden inside that statewide average, is there some region of the state, most notably the San Francisco Bay Area, where maybe we've reached positive levels of agreements? And the answer is no, we haven't. That the average value for the San Francisco Bay Area is about -0.22, so approaching what we might call met. That is, people are sort of neither agreeing nor disagreeing that there's enough charging. There are regional differences. The San Francisco Bay Area has the least disagreement. The San Joaquin Valley has the highest disagreement. The average score, as I said, for the San Francisco Bay Area is about -0.23. It's about -1 for the San Joaquin Valley. And notably, if we think we're going to solely build our way out of this problem, there's 25 to 30 times as much charging on a per square mile basis in the San Francisco Bay Area as in the San Joaquin Valley, meaning we'd have to build an astronomical number of more stations throughout the region, such as the San Joaquin Valley, to even approach the levels of, well, of very slight disagreement that we see in the San Francisco Bay Area. So now moving on to incentive spending. So the blue columns are the annual spending on California clean vehicle rebates. This is just the rebate spending, not the cost to actually administer the program. And the yellow line traces the cumulative total, which up through, so this is a March to February sum, in part because the data starts in March 2010, and because our last data point is in March 2019. And we're approaching about $700 million in CVR spending in California at the time of our last survey. What we have not purchased with all of that money is more awareness that the state, or for that matter, the federal government, is offering such incentives. So here I've selected out only new car buyers, because so these are people who within the 4 to 7 year period prior to their survey had purchased at least one new car. And therefore we're actively looking for information. We're more likely to have heard about things like incentives. But between the surveys, despite spending something like $250 million on incentives, the percentage of the population of new car buyers who say they've heard of such incentives did not increase. Our sort of summary overall summation of the extent to which households have already considered an electric vehicle for their household is this one. So this is the version that's worded specifically for battery electric vehicles. We ask, what have you done already? Have you already considered buying a BE for your household? So this is not a forward-looking question. This is what have you done up to the point of the survey. The answers range from I have not and would not consider buying a vehicle that runs on electricity, all the way up through I already have or have had such a vehicle. We do ask this question worded specifically for PHEVs, BEVs, and fuel cell vehicles in 2017 and 2019. In 2014, the question sort of more directly or alluded to sort of PHEVs and BEVs as a single category. So what I've done for 2017 and 19 is I've taken the answers to the PHEV and BEV questions, created a new variable that is the highest score that people gave to PHEVs or BEVs. And that's the variable that I'll be using for 2017 and 19 to create a comparison to 2014 in these data, which again shows almost no change in the percentage of the households, in particular, who have moved out of those two lightest blue regions. So those are the least levels of consideration. The I haven't and I won't, and the I haven't but maybe I someday. We're still about 50% of the population who's clearly paid no attention to electric vehicles. And the next level up, the ideas occur to me, but no steps taken, gets us up to over 80% of the population. And I think that's what underscores the importance of continuing efforts to try to prompt consumer awareness, is the fact that those categories simply aren't changing all that much. We're sort of sorting people a little bit at the highest levels of consideration, but over this period now spanning 5 and 6 years of market growth, what's clear is that we're selling plug-in vehicles to the same fairly small percentage of households. On a regional basis within California, looking at the data by air district, I've sorted these from left to right by the highest percentages of people who have either owned or shopped for an electric vehicle. So the Bay Area is on the left and the San Joaquin Valley is on the right. And as we would expect, there's 3 to 4 times as many people who either own or have shopped for a vehicle in the Bay Area as in San Joaquin Valley. But clearly, it's not as if we're up to even 10 or 20%, numbers we might like to be moving towards, even in a place like the Bay Area. So there are regional differences, but again, no overwhelming evidence that there's a region in the state in which we might say that electric vehicles and shopping for electric vehicles is really a norm for anything like a majority of households. So I'm just going to give a quick recap of the points here, and then allow the other speakers to tell us more about what they've been doing in the area of engagement and consumer awareness. Our data says that almost nothing's changed from 2014 to 2019 regarding a lack of engagement with plug-in vehicles among the vast majority of car-owning households in California. Consideration of PHEVs and BEVs remains unchanged, which is even more distressing. The fact that it was low in 2014 may have been acceptable because we'd only been doing this for a few years, but it's unchanged over the past 5 years, despite all of the progress that seems to have been made on the supply side. The ability to name PHEVs and BEVs did not increase or diversify as we added more makes and models. And though I didn't show you the data for PHEVs, people do an even worse job of naming PHEVs than they do BEVs. Seeing EV charging, that didn't increase in some sense based on other data from particular workshops with households. I sort of had this idea that for many people, each time they see one, it's just a reminder that there aren't enough of them. We can talk about that more later. And that also, again, despite all the spending on incentives, that the percentage of the population that is aware of incentives has not increased over this interval. And with that cheery news, I will turn it over to people who are actually trying to do something about this.
Thank you so much, Ken. And now we'll hear from Lea Malloy of Cox Automotive.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ken. That was a great intro, and like the segue. My name is Lea Malloy, and I lead emerging technology as well as research and development for Cox Automotive Mobility. And to give this group a little bit of context about Cox as a business, we are a 120-year-old, fourth generation of family-operated business owners, and we've got 2 main divisions, our automotive division and our communications division. So within automotive, where I sit, about a year and a half ago, we started a mobility division really aimed at all that's new in our transportation future, and I'll walk through that in just a minute. So the primary tenet behind our creation is that we believe in this ACES future of transportation. And our definition is a little bit different than maybe the industry standard. For the A, we are focused on autonomous but also aerial transportation because we believe in the future not 100% of the time will goods or services be mobilized in a terrestrial manner. The C is for connected, E, electric, and shared. So our vision is that the future of transportation looks a lot different than today, and we want to play an important and positive role in helping our clients in the industry evolve to embrace this future. And what makes this future really different is the assets that are driving mobility. So, today, traditionally, as part of Manheim's core business, we own 76 wholesale auctions which process used cars, and the majority of those used cars, as you might imagine, are internal combustion. So a lot of our processes and how we support these vehicles is focused on the internal combustion vehicle, and we are waking up just as the consumer is sort of real time to the big opportunity around electric specifically, but also that step level change required in both service and care and feeding and all things that go with electric. So as a good complement to what Ken started out, through the supply side discussion he referenced, I believe the consumer conversation has really shifted. The EV is here, and it's no longer a question of are they coming, but when are they coming? And I think there's no better way to tell that story than to reference the Super Bowl from a couple weeks ago, whereby there was really a whole slew of advertising focus on the battery electric vehicles specifically, and we have 4 really prominent nameplates coming out with either on the road or newly promised battery electrics. You've got the e-tron, you've got the Porsche and the Taycan. There's much fanfare about the Mach-E, and the GMC Hummer EV is certainly one to watch. So I think within the industry and from a consumer perspective, the buzz has really reached a crescendo about the battery electric, but it does come down to a little bit of the supply and demand conversation that Ken alluded to in terms of where will we go from here. So on that note, this next slide really talks to some of the things that we've learned about the consumer and their behaviors. And at Cox Automotive, we also are parent company to Kelley Blue Book and Auto Trader, those consumer shopping sites. And we do a ton of research to really understand the consumer and their changing perceptions around automotive in general. And in September of last year, we launched a study called the rise of consumer mobility and EV adoption. And in that study, we surveyed about 2,500 consumers to really understand what their preferences and mindsets were associated with the battery electric vehicle. But ultimately, those consumers were divided into 3 categories. You're either an EV owner, you're an EV considerer, or you're not considering an EV at all. But big picture, here's what we learned, and none of this should be a surprise to this group. The top 5 items on the right in terms of barriers to EV adoption are pretty well known, right? So number 1 is the battery electric vehicle is too expensive. Numbers 2 and 3 really come down to how far will my battery electric vehicle take me, whether there's concerns specifically about the range of that powertrain or lack of charging infrastructure to help me, get in between where I need to go every day. And numbers 4 and 5 are really focused about the battery itself. And if you look to the right side of this slide, what this slide tells us is there's a whole bunch of skepticism around the EV battery, especially when it's used. And we see a real opportunity there to drive confidence and transparency around the used EV battery, because what the consumer is telling us is that 50% of them think that the battery has a shorter life than it actually has, and about half of them are also very concerned about the battery's inability to hold its charge. So overcoming these concerns and skepticisms that the consumers hold is really critical to driving adoption going forward. But what we also know that's playing out in the background is that we are reaching a closer point of cost parity when you think about comparing battery electrics to gasoline vehicles. Over the last 7 years, prices for internal combustion vehicles have risen almost 19%, while prices of EVs have stayed about flat and risen 2%. So the market is playing out in positive ways, but the consumer perception in many cases is just taking a little bit longer to catch up. The other area I wanted to bring up associated with the EV and what's really important to the DNA of Cox Automotive is the whole opportunity around the second life of the battery. We see the electric vehicle and its battery pack and the first life as just one stage of a ecosystem for the battery pack. And we are focused on learning more about reuse within second life, but also at the end of its life, whenever that period comes where the battery is degraded 70 or 80%, what are recycling options that make sense for that battery? And we've spent a lot of time and energy exploring what those recycling opportunities are and how we can play a positive role in that space. And what's driving this interest is we know that the stockpiles of used EV batteries are growing. McKinsey tells us that by 2030, globally, there'll be a 25-fold surge in the demand for EVs, with the global stockpile reaching the equivalent of about 3.4 million packs. So there's a huge environmental impact for all of these used EV batteries. We feel passionate that we don't want these used EV batteries to end up in oceans or landfills. And in fact, Cox Enterprises at our parent company level, we started a fund called Cox Conserves about 13 years ago, where we have focused nearly $100 million on clean tech efforts to support our environment, whether it's tire paralysis, water reclamation, support for our rivers and oceans. The list is long, but it shows our commitment to the environment, and specifically with the rise of EVs and the forecast of used EV batteries being stockpiled, we feel that there's an important role that we can play in helping provide those end-of-life options for the industry. So I wanted to close this discussion with a little bit of sort of the case study. How are we bringing this home, and how is what I've talked about in terms of our knowledge and commitment to the ACES space and our understanding of consumer preferences, how is that playing out, and how we show up every day as Cox Automotive Mobility, and how are we impacting the communities? And one way we are doing this is through a launch of a series of what we're calling mobility hubs. Our first was set up here in our own backyard of Atlanta, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We've also had a soft launch of a second location right out of Phoenix, Arizona, with eyes on setting up a few more in the Las Vegas and California areas. But the spirit behind these mobility hubs is that they're a place where all types of mobility comes together, and we're helping people satisfy their mobility needs through either ride-share and car share efforts. We are also really focused on setting up services and capabilities to support these different asset classes that I mentioned at the beginning of this call. So we believe in autonomy, we believe in electric, we believe in connected capabilities. So we're spending a lot of energy studying those spaces, but also training up our resources on capabilities such as how do we set up the best charging infrastructure for our clients and for our community partners? How do we get really good at understanding battery technology and battery health so we can communicate that back to the industry? How are we getting really good at understanding some of these pre-autonomy capabilities like advanced driver assist systems so that we can diagnose and calibrate sensors on these rideshare and car share vehicles? So when these vehicles are in our care and feeding, we can ensure that we are sending them back out to our clients and their consumers, knowing that they're safe and ready to hit the road. So our Pivot Atlanta Mobility Hub is an acknowledgement of our commitment to the ACES future and one which we believe is going to be dominated by electric and autonomous fleets of the future. And we are here to help educate both our communities and our partners as we make this journey together.
Thank you so much, Lee. And as a reminder, we will be sharing the slides and the presentation after the webinar. And now I will pass it along to Sergio Lopez of Fourth. We've talked about the research. Now we'll talk about implementation of consumer awareness campaigns.
Hey, everybody. Thank you both to Lee and Ken for all that information. I think it's a great segue on moving forward now to Fourth's work. And this is Sergio Lopez, Program Manager at Fourth. I've been at Fourth for over 3 years. So there we go. So yeah, kind of give a brief overview, general umbrella work on what's how Fourth's efforts looks in the bracket of consumer engagement. In the beginning of this presentation slide, Sylvia referred to the 4 pockets of work that Fourth does. This specific right here is going to be more towards consumer engagement. So I'm going to throw it back to January of 2017. Prior to Fourth's rebrand, I think at the time, well, I know at the time Fourth was Drive Oregon. I know many of you may know that, many of you may not. During this process, the whole idea was to kind of grow both geographically and technologically more into expand beyond Portland, Pacific Northwest, but also grow in the base of not just charging infrastructure, not just electric vehicles, but also just any kind of clean, smart electric transportation. And the whole idea for that went kind of hand in hand was with the opening of the Go Forth Electric Showcase, which is located in downtown Portland and is still there today. So this was kind of the blueprint work that VizWorks, the design team, helped put together. At the time, Esther Rito was managing this work and kind of made this thing come to life with the real thing when this would look like May of 2017, when the doors actually opened, where we essentially runs as a consumer engagement, open floor, brand neutral, 5 different types of electric cars there for people to test drive. That kind of gives people the idea there's no sales pitch, and that electric cars are convenient, accessible. There's rebates, give information on charging infrastructure such as ChargeWay and PlugShare to kind of give the consumer the idea and the knowledge that and the appeal that EVs are easy to use. It's just the education that lacks, specifically in a lot of the dealership component to it. So the Go Forth is still running strong. It was originally funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, but now funded through other work. And if you are in the Portland area, I recommend stopping by and checking out what the space is all about. So with that being said, back in September of this past year of 2019, with the parallel work of Drive Electric Week, as we call Drive Electric Month, just because it becomes a really, really busy month for a lot of the consumer engagement that we do. We kind of ran a marketing campaign, probably the biggest one we've ever done. A big shout out to the marketing and communications team and Kevin Friedman here at Fourth. We're kind of pushing this work forward. We invested in this billboard that went by the campaign name of Change the Way You Roll. It says Drive Electric, and with the address posted there to kind of get people wondering, okay, we drive electric, what does this mean? Let's check it out. And this was located in the inner northeast district of Portland, over by the Moda Center where the Trailblazers play. So there's a lot of traffic there, both pedestrian, vehicle, all types. It's right where the I-5 and the I-84 intersect. So it's a pretty busy part of town. So essentially, this was a huge campaign that we ran to get people to the showcase to test drive cars. And then when you were at the showcase, there was basically a raffle prize that would enter you to win a weekend getaway in an EV of your choice that Fourth has, or tickets to the Portland Trailblazers game. So that was a big campaign for us to kind of push that work forward and get people to downtown Portland. More work that the showcases kind of ran forward is the access to electric mobility, more so related to electric scooters. Back in the summer of 2018, scooters hit the city of Portland with PBOTS as the main client, Portland Bureau of Transportation. And it was back, I think, from June to November of 2018 is when it launched. High usage, as we all know, across the states, it was kind of a thing that essentially just went viral, and people were talking about it all over essentially the world. So when Pilot 2.0 launched, PBOT kind of put more regulations on making sure that the companies were essentially following regulations and rules and making sure primarily that the scooters were given access to a lot of individuals and not just downtown centered folks. So essentially, with that being said, PBOT got all the data, implemented new regulations that focused on transportation equity and safety incentives for scooter companies. So when a scooter company would essentially do workshops out in the outskirts of the city where transportation was less accessible, PBOT would incentivize them with allowing them to put more scooters on the road, and that kind of pushed forward the idea of better access for all with e-mobility. And fourth played a huge role in making sure that we were kind of the component to linking both together the private companies, whether it was Lime, Lyft, et cetera, or a Bird, and putting them in contact with the local CPOs that were basically requesting demand from the community. And here's a picture of the first one we ever did at the Go for Buck Showcase. Joe Wachunas basically put this thing together, and we had about 22 people, I think, test drive and come. And essentially, this included free helmets, $10 credit code for the Lime scooters, and a safety etiquette course that basically included kind of a ride around the block that taught kind of the protocols to left turn signals, et cetera, and just etiquette on how to lock and work the scooter on the furnishing zone and whatnot. So with the showcase, that kind of blew up for us in a way where it created a lot of demand on one-on-one consumer engagement that included ride and drives. This is a picture that we did back almost a year ago, where we kind of gave a little ride and drive to PGE employees. But we've essentially gone across the Pacific Northwest. That includes obviously the Portland metro area, the Willamette Valley, Central Oregon, Oregon coast, down to Coos Bay. Central Washington includes Yakima. Eastern Washington includes Walla Walla, and the Puget Sound area, which includes Tacoma, Seattle, Bellingham. And this has been in partnership with a lot of utility companies such as Pacific Power, PGE, Clark PUD, to kind of make sure that a lot of the residents and customers are being introduced now to transportation electrification, both in urban and rural areas. And we have even done one in NorCal, I think it was in Wairika, in the partnership with Pacific Power. So that has been huge for us, and I think the demand on ride and drives is never ending, and it's becoming a good thing where it's year round we have events going on, even in the winter time. And I do want to kind of emphasize this photo a little bit. So essentially, this is a Model 3 going down the gorge, I-84. I think this is in Vista House. So we did a campaign with Travel Oregon, a state-based travel agency that kind of brings people to Oregon and whatnot. And essentially, what we did with this photo shoot is we kind of got together as a team and kind of discussed. There's really no high-profile pictures that showcase electric cars in rural areas, such as Crater Lake or Painted Hills, or these statewide destinations that are huge for travel appeal, or even camping, etc. So we ran a campaign where we took the Model 3, for example, through the gorge. We did a 2018 i3 to Crater Lake and back. We did a 2019 Nissan Leaf to Painted Hills and John Day. And then we did the 2017 Chevy Bolt up the I-5 corridor. And we took these really nice pictures by the team of Dylan Van Wielden in partnership with Travel Oregon to kind of display that getting your electric car to these areas is possible. Yes, charging infrastructure is still growing. We need more. But if we can take these pictures and prove that it is there and make it more appealing to the consumer, that we're on the right path and on the right road, no pun intended. So this is one of the pictures that we took that displays a Model 3 on the on the Gorge Corridor 84. And then the biggest component, kind of to wrap it up here, is focusing on the transportation equity side. That it's great to focus in downtown. It's great to push the work forward, but I think making sure that we are fully aware and fully creating the work that we want to make sure that the communities that need it the most are given access and an opportunity to this transportation. As we all know, transportation is probably the second, I think, in the federal lens, in-house expense, right behind rent. And we want to make sure that, if we got to find unique ways to communicate and to create partnerships and create trust to make sure that communities that need it the most are given access. While we introduce new transportation technologies, I think it's a great opportunity to kind of push for new ideas, policies, movements to make sure that that EVs and charging infrastructure and scooters and whatnot are being introduced in the right way and actually being used for the right reasons, which is essentially transportation point A to point B. So one of the examples that we did that was in partnership with PGE. PGE did through Clean Fields ran a really great grant fund program that gave the opportunity for community-based organizations, government organizations, nonprofits to apply for a grant fund that would include transportation electrification into their program or their services. They had about, at the time, listed 1.75 million in cap for the grant fund, and fourth was contracted to kind of provide technical assistance to these CBOs and nonprofits that either didn't have the personnel bandwidth to apply and write these grants, or B, just the information and knowledge of how to translate charging costs of kilowatts per hour or a range or which cars actually existed that would complement their services. So a total of 2.25 million was granted to 16 local community-based organizations across PGE territory area. And we helped out with about 8 or 9 that were funded. But here are 4 that were prime examples that we helped do assistance on. So that includes Ride Connection, Meals on Wheels, NAYA, which is Native American Youth and Family Center, and the Oregon Food Bank. So one of the main things that we want to keep pushing forward, both with Fourth and in partnership with our stakeholders and partners, is that the community-based lens is very important, if not the most critical with this industry. So if there's unique ways of communicating and putting these 2 things together, which is community needs and electric vehicles, this is one great way to do it. So a big shout out to PGE for making this grant fund a success thus far.
Thank you so much, Sergio. And finally, we'll hear from our sponsor, Electrify America. We'll be hearing from Misty Murphy, Senior Manager of Marketing, and they will be discussing their multimedia consumer awareness campaign, Normal Now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time today. My name is Misty Murphy, and on your screen today, you should be seeing a slide regarding our brand neutral campaign called Normal Now. So we launched our campaign back in July, and it is a full 360 digital, and we are going to be doing some out-of-home starting in April. So what you're seeing here is some of the creative work that we've done thus far. And the simple idea with our campaign is through some of the market research that we've done, the concept of zero-emission vehicles is still very scary to the normal mid-American who we're targeting. So we're targeting basically every single U.S. Average American in the United States that is very much upper funnel, not necessarily considering an EV. We're not in the middle part of the purchase funnel. We're very high funnel awareness tactics. And through our research, people are very scared of EVs. They think it's not the car for them. It seems weird to them. And so we've done a lot of analysis through our campaigns. And so when we were looking for a creative agency, they pitched this concept to us, which is now called Normal Now, that, basically electronics seemed weird at once and they're now mainstreamed. And so our campaign really plays on this notion that, computers seemed weird at first, but they're normal now. Basically, email seemed weird at first. Smartwatches seemed weird at first. Games seemed weird at first. And so it plays on these mainstream things that were kind of foreign objects to us at one time, but are completely mainstream, which is what we're saying electric cars are going to be completely mainstreamed. And so our campaign, again, launched in July, and it ran through the end of December. And so we've taken a pause on our campaign to analyze our results for 3 months, and we're going back in market in April. And so the idea is to basically stimulate awareness and interest about this concept that, you know, technology seemed weird at first, whatever that technology was. Electric cars are normal now, kind of be thought-provoking. So we did a series of digital targeted banner ads, 15-second TV spots that were played on connected TV. So we didn't run traditional TV ads. So we did all connected TV, so things that where people are consuming TV today and day. So like on Hulu and smart TVs that you may have at your home, online streaming TV, Yahoo Sports, etc. And basically, again, who we're targeting is very much upper funnel. So people who are basically very much unaware of electric vehicles, because what we're trying to do is the work that necessarily the OEMs are not doing. So the OEMs are kind of people who are targeting those who are somewhat know about an EV or have raised their hand about an EV. We're trying to kind of target that very much upper funnel. And the single main idea that we're doing is, despite what you might think, electric cars are surprisingly normal. And through our ad campaign, we are going to be featuring several EVs that are going to be coming to market, and to kind of showing the wide variety of range from SUVs to single sedans and to some future cars in the future, which we hope to share with you guys maybe in the future. And so what you see here is some 15-second spots, some play on some radio spots, some Spanish radio that we ran in California. And if you go to normalnow.com, you can see the 15-second commercials. You can see our radio spots that we ran as well. And so the radio spots are kind of a play on old radio, basically when radio spots were kind of ran back in the 50s, and they're kind of the old traditional when people would listen to radio for their series and their evening entertainment. And so it's kind of that play on radio ads seemed weird at first, electric cars are normal now. And so the initial results that we've seen come in is it's definitely generating interest in people's, and it's been thought-provoking. And so we have really taken a look at the variety of ads that we put out there, and we're taking the best performing ads, and we're going to be introducing some new ad units back in April. One of the other things that I wanted to make you guys aware is that all the creative that we have developed, we have made available to all of our community-based organizations, all of the EV partners and clubs. And at the end of December, we had over 1,100 downloads of our assets. So 1,100 of our national partners in the EV community had downloaded our assets and are running it in various places in their local communities. So we were really excited to see that. So as we're continuing to analyze our results, we hope to be able to share some impact of what this campaign's doing, and then our media plan for April through the end of the year. But this is simply what the campaign looks like, and obviously it'll look very similar going into Flight 2 beginning in April, with just some new old technology creative units being added in.
Thank you so much, Misty. Now we'll get to the Q&A portion of the webinar. And I think the first question speaks to the last two presentation. How do you reach out to multi-family residents or non-English speakers when it comes to the campaigns, consumer awareness campaigns, whether it's how they charge, if they're in a multi-unit dwelling, and more?
Yeah, so I can take a shot at this first. So this is Sergio speaking at Fourth. So one of the examples that we had was when we ran a demonstration project with Hacienda. It's probably the closest connection we had in this scenario was morning workshops to kind of just address the education component to it. It's very difficult to, I think the main idea here is to make residents aware of the service and the transportation technology. Um, More so than making sure that they're using it, because I think there's a lot of barriers that either the entity that's providing the service is not aware of, whether you're a private company, another nonprofit, or a utility company. I think it's important to kind of just demonstrate and start more with the education rather than just focusing on no, you have to use the service. We really want to see like really good KPIs. So the workshops is probably the most impactful to see what the need is, whether it's language barrier technology or just more, bureaucratic, systematic approach that limits people from using it because they don't have a driver's license. So I think for us is more workshop based and also needs assessment. We ran a needs assessment through both Opal and Verde here in Portland, and they've done a great job of making sure that they are listening to the neighborhoods first about what technology is actually needed.
Thank you.
So this is Misty. I can just talk about how we do some targeting for Hispanic speakers. So a lot of platforms for streaming audio and social media, we're able to target our ads in language because they are turning on their language speaking preferences when they sign up or after they sign up. So for example, Pandora or Facebook, you can turn on your how you receive your news feeds or your audio if it's in language in Spanish. And so if you turn that on, we are serving that up. And then we're also able to do zip code targeting. And so that's how we're able to target, and particularly in California is where we're doing a lot of our targeting in Spanish.
Thank you. And I will pose this question to all of the speakers today. How are we supporting developing EV-specific resources for dealerships? We know people go to the dealerships to buy the cars, and we know there's lack of product available at dealerships, or lack of knowledge on that level. How are we making sure that dealerships are aware and are able to sell this product? And I will open it to Lee to speak on this, and then the other speakers as well.
Sure, great question. I think both indirectly and directly, we're showing progress and we're focused on those areas. So indirectly, helping dealers through education, especially on our consumer-facing properties like Kelley Blue Book and Auto Trader. A more educated consumer then goes into the dealer with questions and information that requires action and response. So that's sort of the indirect. But the direct is, we have been working with dealers through a really large and also very in-depth sales team, and we have partnered with them to transition their businesses in a lot of different ways historically, and we see this as just another way which we can partner with them to help provide education, provide the research we're doing about the consumer perceptions about the EV industry, and to provide support, because certainly we're learning through all of the services we do in our reconditioning shops on the wholesale side that the care and feeding for an electric vehicle looks a lot different, and the skill level to do this type of work, especially when it comes down to the electric and electronic units as well as the diagnostic capabilities, is just very different from what's been more traditional.
So the next question goes to research or specific campaigns that are focused on workplace charging or home charging, where we know 80% of charging takes place. Are there any studies or campaigns that have been done to make the consumer aware that you can charge at home rather than relying on public charging? And is that a benefit or a way to go into when we're looking at educating folks on charging infrastructure? Okay. And I will speak to that because we do know that Ford has a workplace charging program where we are working to educate workers and we are working to educate consumer about where you can charge. There are also misconceptions on how much electricity you might be getting billed for when you do charge at home. So there is a program in place here for to educate the consumer in both the workplace to make sure that you understand what you're bargaining for when you buy an electric vehicles, and that's why we do advocate for folks to come to places like the showcase so you can get better educated on that. And we know that there are also some utility programs that are helping folks manage charging as well on when are the best times to charge. And we do have time for one more question before we wrap it up. When we are focusing on consumer engagement or when we're doing research, how are we making sure that everybody's voice is being heard? How are we moving the needle equitably? Whether it's through our studies, are we making sure that we're including folks that generally are from marginalized and underserved community with the technology? And also when we're when we're reaching out to our consumers, how are we making sure those are all being done and we're hearing everyone's voices?
Yeah, so this is Sergio from Fourth. I kind of focused a little bit on it earlier. The needs assessment has been the most impactful way of, for us at least, to see what's actually going to be efficient for the area that needs the transportation rather than only installing electric vehicles or charging stations. I think with that being said, it's been kind of a way that it opens up different markets of transportation, such as e-bikes or e-scooters or infrastructure itself. Um, and I think running pilot projects and doing the needs assessment has been a way to kind of understand the needs more rather than assuming that EVs is the only way. Another example of that is through ACCC Bloomberg work that we are involved in the city of St. Louis. We're attempting to do a charging infrastructure delivery for the city of St. Louis to install more charging stations essentially across the city. But the north part of St. Louis is going through a massive depopulation that at that time we kind of realized that maybe charging stations isn't what this community actually needs and won't be the most efficient way. So how can we find a pragmatic way of making sure that the community needs is being fulfilled with electric transportation and maybe also implementing charging stations. So I think those are examples where you kind of have to change the pivot a little bit and see. It may not just be EVs; it can also be shuttles or e-bikes or different modes of transportation that involve electric and smart and essentially sustainable.
And this is Lee. I would also add in that the example I mentioned at the end of my presentation, where we have established a mobility hub on the south side of Atlanta, that is traditionally known as a more economically challenged area, certainly a charging desert, not where one expects to see a lot of EVs. And we have a great partnership there with Lyft and their Express Drive program, introducing Bolts into the marketplace as one example of where we're providing access and education around the battery electric to different demographics. And we're also really active in engaging the community about the work we're doing down there in terms of job creation, but also wanting them to understand and get involved and to support sort of the regentrification of this part of town.
Okay. And thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And thank you to our speakers today. And also thank you to Electrify America for sponsoring this webinar. These are the contact info for our speakers today. And if you would like to learn more, we will also be sharing a recap of this webinar shortly after this presentation. And we do hope you're able to join us on March 10th for our Why Workplace Charging webinar. We will be joined by SimaConnect, Burns and McDonnell, and Ford's program manager, Ann Ramsey, on highlighting the how and why of workplace charging. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we hope to see you in March.